The croissant, I began earnestly, is the most underutilized instrument of devotional growth in the known universe. Introduce them to your worshippers and, within 3 generations, your subscriber base may finally become large enough to rival the Christian God.
Who could not be here,
Yog-Sothoth added.
but assured me that he is everywhere.
Several of my grandfather's eyes narrowed in different chronological directions.
Which is suspicious, because I am the gatekeeper of time, and I could not find him there either.
Perhaps he declined the invitation and put a cosmic ad blocker on the account of you peeking into his domain again.
Madeline offered as multiple strands of her tentacle hair wrote things down on her clipboard.
Well, then he should have selected that option on the calendar request.
Yog-Sothoth replied indignantly.
Omnipresence is still not an acceptable substitute for tardiness.
I tapped the presentation board with my gloved pointer. Yahweh's attendance record is irrelevant. His market share of carbohydrates is not. The representatives of the other pantheons stared back at me with strained attentiveness. They had arrived expecting nutritional policy. Several slides later, they were discovering that their collective knowledge of food began with Persephone and Demeter negotiating the crop seasons, and ended with everyone else waiting for something edible to fall from a tree. Several of them glanced toward the exit. Yog-Sothoth followed their gaze with a few of his eyes.
So I'm noticing some interest in the door.
The room settled into a deeper category of silence.
That's understandable. Meetings can feel restrictive when they contain information.
His eyes narrowed pleasantly.
But if everyone could go ahead and remain seated until Cthulhu finishes explaining the strategic value of interpantheon croissant placement, that would be terrific.
No one moved. Yog-Sothoth smiled with several mouths.
See? Everyone likes being here.
In fairness, Ra was leaning forward to decipher my handwriting, which was a cross between several ancient languages I enthusiastically spun together in cursive because the board didn't have enough space. Odin was relying on Hugin and Munin to translate. The other gods drew different shapes of croissants onto their notebooks. Madeline alone seemed unconvinced. She had lowered her face behind her clipboard until only the upper curve of her green tentacle hair remained visible, then tucked another strand across the gap as though attempting to construct a privacy screen from this meeting and professional disappointment. I chose to interpret this as note-taking. Consider this, Ra. Your current icon is the sun disk, a flat circle. Respectable, certainly, but visually complacent. The croissant is a crescent. It participates in the sacred geometry of the heavens while remaining portable enough to distribute before dawn. I tapped Egypt on the presentation board. Commission several billion. Require them as the morning offering at every altar from Memphis to Thebes. You already possess solar theology, ceremonial bread, and a priesthood accustomed to waking before everyone else. I am merely introducing laminated efficiency. Ra studied the diagram, apparently determined to meet me halfway.
Would it be presented to the sun?
He asked.
Or does the sun, when examining the flakiness of a croissant, bake it?
Both interpretations are needlessly literal. The relevant point is that laminated dough resembles the solar cycle, layered, radiant, and repeatedly destroyed by people who leave it unattended near heat. I moved the pointer to the illustration of a priest holding a pastry aloft, Picture the morning ritual. The sun rises. The priests do not greet it with a heavy, joyless loaf of dinkel wheat, dense enough to survive burial. They break open a warm croissant. The crust gives way. The flakes scatter like cosmic dust. Butter perfumes the temple. Your worshippers cease associating sunrise with grueling labor in the fields and begin associating your arrival with unparalleled texture. Ra nodded slowly, understanding nothing, and began sketching what appeared to be Anubis unwrapping Medjed for breakfast. Odin raised one finger.
Could the dead take them into Valhalla? Our Valkyries get hungry when transporting them from place of death to the afterlife.
But of course, Odin. A croissant is essentially a longship rendered in butter, curved hull, layered construction, culturally improved by the presence of alcohol.
Then each warrior would receive one upon arrival too.
Ideally before arrival. Your current onboarding process begins with violent death, which produces unnecessarily negative first impressions. No one works up an appetite while dying. Odin scratched his head.
Are you sure? I've never had an issue with it.
That's because we're immortals.
Madeline said. Her green eyes moved from Odin to me, carrying the exhausted expectation that one of us might eventually restore logic to the conversation. I shrugged. We attempted to market around that once. Mortal response was discouraging. Odin turned to Ra.
We should speak with Hel and Anubis. A pastry hall might give them a reason to leave the underworld for a few hours.
Ra nodded.
Anubis could use the air.
So could Hel.
The death gods are known for having some strange aversion to ventilation and pollen, though. So I hear. That might discourage diplomacy.
Yog-Sothoth said. Several of his eyes shifted toward them.
Just so we are all operating from the same employee handbook. Two death gods may not occupy the same mortal domain without prior approval.
Odin frowned.
Why?
Because the last time it happened, every soul died twice, not to mention an incident where departed Christians arrived in Atlantis, were rerouted to the Jade Palace, and finally rerouted back to Limbo until the paperwork got sorted out. Michael and Gabriel are still ironing out the paperwork.
Ra lowered his pen.
Was that serious?
The embalming chamber is not relevant, I said, moving my pointer to the next diagram and recovering the point of what brought us all here today. What matters is devotional retention. Worshippers who associate their gods with warm pastry are less likely to abandon the faith during periods of famine, philosophical doubt, or disappointing weather. Ra was still considering the logistics.
Would the croissants themselves require embalming?
No.
But you said they were for eternity.
I said nothing of the sort. Eternity was contextual. Please do not mummify breakfast. Odin crossed something out in his notes.
Then the pastry hall will require daily resupply. But who do we call for resupplies?
And just as I was preparing to deliver several Nobel Peace Prize winning remarks on pastry diplomacy, one of Elon Musk's satellites phased through the conference table. It split the fruit bowl, scattered grapes across 3 pantheons, and lodged itself between Ra and Odin with a grinding metallic shriek. A Shiba Inu had been engraved into the hull. I looked at the dog. The dog looked back at me. Ra leaned closer.
Is that Anubis in another form?
Odin reached into a pocket dimension, withdrew Gungnir, and aimed it at the satellite, as though the meeting had developed a spider. Madeline pushed her seat back, considered the wreckage, and left the room without explanation. She did not return. I did my best to ignore it. One learns as head librarian that acknowledging every impossible noise merely encourages existence to produce another. The library contains billions of books, several migratory archives, 2 oceans with overdue fines, and a corridor that has been coughing since the Bronze Age. If I interrupted every lecture because the room grew satellites, like crown whales grow architecture from their cranium, nothing would ever be accomplished. As I was saying, dietary balance cannot be achieved by removing everything that makes life tolerable and arranging the remainder into a bowl. The screech returned, followed by a deep grinding sound and the unmistakable crackle of solar panels being chewed by something with continental molars. This was offensive on several levels. Outside the conference chamber, an adolescent sentient moon had caught a SpaceX satellite between 2 mountain ranges and was working it from side to side, like a dog attempting to understand a particularly expensive bone. Its seas shifted with concentration. Every few seconds, the satellite's antenna scraped across a crater and produced the noise of a cathedral being dragged through a cutlery drawer. I'd like to assure everyone that these satellites are not one of mine. The library does not issue them. The moon bit down. A burst of radio static passed through the chamber. Then it burped. The resulting gravitational disturbance overturned the water glasses, reversed the rainfall in 3 minor heavens, and caused my second chart to fold itself into a swan. The swan immediately flew into Odin's beard, which improved neither the meeting nor Odin. I waited for everyone to settle. Croissants, I resumed. Also encourage moderation because consuming 12 of them produces an excessive amount of carbs. Something struck the western window. This time I looked. A juvenile leviathan had wrapped itself around another satellite and was using the communications array to scratch the armored plates along its spine. The creature appeared deeply satisfied. The satellite did not. Each pass tore away another layer of insulation and broadcast fragments of human advertising across the room. For 6 seconds, the god of agriculture was informed that refinancing his home could change his life. For another 4, Athena received a commercial for tactical sunglasses. The Leviathan scratched harder. A voice from the satellite promised Odin that local singles were waiting to meet him. Odin quietly turned his chair toward the window. This is why I should have just sent an email, I said to myself. No one acknowledged the point. Several gods were now avoiding eye contact with both me and the satellite. Madeline was still gone. Through the window, I thought I saw one of the library's vacation pods blast away from the docking ring. It had her name on it. Anyway, I returned to the chart, retrieved my pointer, and indicated the section marked Cultural Well-Being. A dietary system that excludes croissants is merely punishment with measurements. Civilizations do not become healthier because someone has replaced butter with moral superiority. They become irritable, secretive, and prone to eating pastries over the sink at midnight, while insisting the experience does not count. A shadow passed over the chamber. The room darkened. Beyond the broken edge of the roof, a crown whale drifted through the library's upper atmosphere, with the patient majesty of a living cathedral that had forgotten where it parked. A satellite was lodged between the baleen structures beneath its jaw. The whale nudged it with one fin. The screen flickered. For several reverent seconds it watched a much smaller whale breach beside a tour boat, while a narrator described the species as mysterious and highly intelligent. Then the crown whale looked through the conference window at me. I looked back. Apparently satisfied, it settled beside the library and began watching international coverage at a volume normally used to announce the end of worlds. The Pantheon representatives could no longer hear me. I raised my voice. This does not invalidate the croissant. Another satellite came through the ceiling. It struck the conference table, bounced once, crossed 2 sacred place settings, and buried itself in the fruit bowl with the terrible precision of an argument arriving after the debate had ended. Silence returned, apart from CNN, the moon chewing, the Leviathan scratching itself, and a muffled advertisement emerging from beneath the oranges. I lowered my pointer. This was not the first satellite to interrupt one of my meetings. It was not even the first satellite to land in refreshments. Humanity had spent the previous decade wrapping its planet in enough telecommunications equipment to make the night sky resemble a junk drawer with venture capital, and the Interdimensional Library occupied an unfortunate position downstream from several laws of physics. Still, there are limits. I had tolerated satellites phasing into my covers as I tried to sleep. I had tolerated satellites nesting in the hallways like a metallic Snorlax creature. I had tolerated one becoming briefly worshipped by a tribe of sentient toasters from the appliance section. After its navigation light convinced them it controlled the room's temperature. But no head librarian should be expected to defend the nutritional dignity of laminated pastry, while a sentient moon eats broadband outside the window. The gods stared at me for a solution. I stared at the satellite steaming among the pears. The satellite began playing an advertisement for cryptocurrency. And that, regrettably, is how the meeting on interpantheon dietary standards became Elon Musk's fault. Yes, naturally, even in outer space, everything was his fault, even though I was the one, unfortunately, who felt deep regret about this whole situaton. An email would have prevented the other gods from seeing that my conference chamber had become a punching bag for Earth's orbital ambitions. My grandfather, Yog-Sothoth, lowered the dietary proposal I had spent 6 months preparing. He exists at every point in space and time simultaneously, which means he already knows how every meeting will end. He continues attending them anyway, presumably because omniscience does not provide enough opportunities to embarrass one's descendants in public. His many mouths produced a sound like someone trying to use a harmonica for a cigarette.
So here's the thing, champ.
Several of his eyes rolled like magic 8-ball readings toward a 5th-dimensional satellite, phasing in and out of the desk's fruit bowl. Again.
I think we need to switch on our eldritch light bulbs, adjust our thinking caps, and do something about the satellite problem before we continue this meeting.
And how many trillionaires does it take to change a light bulb, Yog? Yog-Sothoth gave me a quizzical look. The other gods noticed immediately and leaned into the rare pleasure of seeing the gatekeeper of time caught somewhere other than 5 minutes ahead of everyone else. None, I continued. They purchase the sun, disable it for every civilization unable to afford the premium tier, and describe the resulting darkness as market efficiency. Across the table, Ra reached up and turned the solar dial above his head off. The conference chamber shuddered into the infant moments of an eclipse, except for the satellite burning in the fruit bowl. whose signal had somehow latched onto this dimension more securely than the network that launched it. Ra turned the dial back on, frowned at it, then switched it off again with the grave concentration of someone trying to determine whether daylight had been installed incorrectly. Ra, please do not cause the heat death of the universe in our boardroom, Yog-Sothoth asked with the calm of middle management. It is not scheduled for another few billion years in this timeline.
I am adjusting my thinking cap as you suggested.
I was talking to my grandson. You are fine, and please do not reboot the sound in our meeting room.
Thor raised Mjolnir and made the small, universally understood gesture of a man asking whether the problem required hitting. Ra nodded at him, to which Thor tapped the solar dial. Daylight returned with the concussive dignity of a fuse box being threatened by a blacksmith. And the room survived another planetary-sized apocalypse. One of Yog's mouths sighed.
Cthulhu, have you considered taking this seriously?
I'm taking it rather seriously, Grandfather. In fact, this is the most serious moment of my life's work. Croissants are the highest form of divinity after all.
Right, kiddo. Perhaps, instead of delivering another economic sermon to us, you could handle the satellite problem first.
I am handling it.
How?
Well, I could invent Cthulhu coin, bankrupt SpaceX, purchase the remains, and have the satellites removed as part of the liquidation. Odin leaned forward.
Is Cthulhu coin backed by gold?
No.
Land?
No.
Does it carry the financial reports of companies like Microsoft?
It is backed by me existing, and that is enough. Odin sat back, bewildered.
Well, that doesn't sound right.
Ra, who had been studying the satellite as though it might explain itself if given enough ceremonial respect, lifted one hand.
Why not ask your book for help?
I looked at him curiously. The Necronomicon.
Yes. We consult the Book of the Dead whenever living mortals become difficult, or when someone begins discussing their diet.
Ra said enthusiastically.
I also use it for relationship advice.
Odin turned toward him.
Does it help?
Not really.
Ra said.
But it agrees that dating is easier when the other person is alive enough to participate.
Across the room, the Necronomicon opened itself to a blank page. I looked at the Necronomicon. The Necronomicon looked at me with all four eyes, opened itself to a blank page, and began writing before I had finished objecting. May I have a little authority? I knew before the ink had dried that I had been betrayed. The Necronomicon is a forbidden repository of knowledge capable of reorganizing the human mind into decorative shapes.
So it's detail-oriented.
It cannot speak.
Even better.
It has no hands. My grandfather glanced toward the satellite lodged among the pairs.
And yours seem occupied.
The other gods pretended not to enjoy this. After the meeting prematurely concluded, Yog-Sothoth convinced me in the end, and I delegated the matter to the Necronomicon despite everything. The Necronomicon cannot speak, which is true. This is among its more appealing qualities. It communicates by writing in its own pages, snapping its covers, and flapping from room to room with the urgent self-importance of a document that has discovered it can assign homework. It is also curious, although only in extremely narrow directions. Give it a question and it will pursue the answer across forbidden archives, collapsed timelines, and the private correspondence of dead gods. It will uncover the precise truth with extraordinary speed. It will not, under any circumstances, investigate the two neighboring truths, that explain why the first one is a terrible idea. I told it to find a species capable of collecting the loose objects scattered throughout the library. The Necronomicon opened to a blank page. What sort of creature becomes happiest when it finds something shiny lying around? That seems like a reasonable place to begin. The book slammed shut and flew away. By sunset, it had hired dragons. I should emphasize that dragons possess many excellent qualities. They are strong, resistant to nearly every known cleaning chemical, and able to distinguish 17 varieties of gold by scent. They also require very little safety equipment, because most workplace hazards were originally invented to keep dragons out. The Necronomicon had found 6 of them through a volcanic employment exchange. Their references described them as tireless collectors with centuries of experience consolidating valuable materials into centralized locations. This was accurate in the same way that calling a siege engine an enthusiastic visitor is accurate. The essential facts are present. Their arrangement is criminal. Still, the results were immediate. By the following morning, the eastern halls were immaculate. For the first time in 9 centuries, the floor acquired a visible color. It was blue. None of us had known this. Several staff members stood around admiring it, until we remembered that floors are not ordinarily considered discoveries. The broken teleporters vanished. The molted exoskeletons vanished. The procession of dead satellites that had been leaning against every wing vanished. Entire corridors opened like archaeological excavations. One junior librarian reached her desk without climbing equipment and became briefly religious. I was preparing to admit that Yog-Sothoth might have been right when I noticed several empty shelves. At first, I assumed the books had been moved so the dragons could clean behind them. Then I discovered that the shelves had also been moved. So had the reading lamps, the brass railings, 4 marble busts, and a door whose hinges contained a quantity of silver. Visible only to creatures with a pathological relationship to mineral rights. Dragons do not collect rubbish. Dragons collect property whose owners have failed to defend it with sufficient fire. The distinction had escaped the Necronomicon. I followed a trail of loose coins toward the staff kitchen. The refrigerator door would not open. Something inside had been stacked against it with the geological commitment usually associated with mountain formation. When I finally tore it free, I discovered 3 planetary crowns, most of the library's first editions, 7 ceremonial swords, the emergency generator, 200 pounds of gold, an interlibrary loan cart, and a frost giant who claimed he had only gone in for milk. The food had been removed to make room. At the rear of the second shelf, wedged between a jar of immortal preserves and the complete military archive of the Lizard Kings, was the Necronomicon. Frost coated its cover. It opened with considerable difficulty and displayed a sentence in trembling blue ink. I have been promoted to refrigerator treasure. I continued looking at it. This position includes extensive field research. A small icicle broke from its spine. I would like to be demoted. Did the dragons put you in here? The ink hesitated. I was unattended. Then beneath it, please attend to me. The dragons defended their methods. They pointed out that every object had been collected. The halls were clean and the refrigerator was now the most valuable appliance in 12 dimensions. One had curled around the vegetable drawer and declared it an ancestral seat. I informed them that they were fired. They responded by claiming the library as Severance. The ensuing negotiation lasted 11 hours and consumed most of the west staircase. We eventually recovered the books, although many now contain scorch marks and the proprietary scent dragons use to indicate that future theft will be answered through the nostrils. The refrigerator was returned to staff use after an extensive dehoarding process and a small coronation. The Necronomicon spent the next day beneath a heating lamp. It wrote nothing until the frost had melted from its index. Then it opened to a new page. Primary failure. Cleaners must not hoard. Correct. Secondary requirement. Cleaners must be too large to enter refrigerators. I considered asking what it intended. Then I remembered Yog-Sothoth's advice. Trust requires allowing others the freedom to succeed, to fail, and apparently to interpret household appliances as a recruitment constraint. You may proceed. The Necronomicon flapped away. 3 days later, the sentient planets arrived, including the one who kept interrupting my meetings with the other gods by eating billionaire satellites like edible silverware. The Necronomicon, to its enthusiastic credit, argued that they came highly recommended by several nebulae. Each possessed its own atmosphere, gravitational field, and indigenous weather. According to the Necronomicon's research, they had spent billions of years collecting loose matter and had never once placed any of it in a refrigerator. This should have concerned me for reasons beyond refrigeration. The first planet approached the library from above. I sent instructions directing it toward the main entrance. It replied that every side of a building appeared to be a main entrance when viewed from space. I pointed out the doors. It asked which mountain range I meant. Before I could clarify, the planet extended its gravity through the roof. The rubbish disappeared instantly. So did the roof. For one magnificent second, the entire central atrium rose into the air in neat concentric rings. Broken satellites, alien packaging, loose furniture, carpets, bookshelves, scholars, and approximately half of comparative eschatology revolved above us in perfect order. It was the cleanest the library had ever been. It was also becoming a moon. Release the building, I ordered. The planet released the building. This was worse. The second planet attempted a gentler approach by nudging the eastern wing with its magnetic field. Unfortunately, it mistook load-bearing columns for unusually stubborn refuse. The garbage vanished, followed by 3 galleries, 6 offices, and the staircase we had only just stopped the dragons from eating. The third planet never found the entrance at all. It mistook the library's dimensional foundation for a welcome mat and tried to shake it. Throughout this, the Necronomicon flew beside me, opening and closing its pages as rapidly as it could write. The rubbish is going away very quickly. A section of roof passed overhead. Some of the library is also going away. Did you ask whether they understood buildings? The book turned several pages. They understand continents. That is not the same scale. Another section of roof rose into orbit. It is from far enough away. That is not the same scale. It hesitated, then underlined continents as though the problem might be my reading comprehension. I dismissed the planets before they could clean the library down to a philosophical concept. One attempted to turn around too quickly and caused the tides in the aquarium archives. Another left a review describing our entrance as unreasonably local. By this point, professionalism had cost me 2 rooms, a staircase, several thousand books, and whatever dignity remains available to a librarian who has to ask a planet to stop tidying him. The Necronomicon settled on the edge of my desk. Its cover was bent. One corner still carried a dragon's price tag. It opened slowly. Revised question. What consumes matter without hoarding it, damaging its container, or requiring a door? There followed several pages of calculations, astronomical records, and one heavily annotated illustration. Then it wrote a single name. I want to employ Elon Musk. I read the sentence twice, largely because the first reading had given me no reason to trust it. Now, dear listener, I want you to consider the full absurdity of that sentence. The Necronomicon had spent several days hiring dragons, misclassifying planets, damaging the library, and discovering that scale is not the same thing as competence. From this sequence of failures, it had somehow concluded that the next rational step was to place a billionaire at the bottom of its imaginary organizational chart. This was not a recommendation. It was a hostile takeover conceived by a book that had only recently learned the word management, and already misunderstood it in every available direction. I looked at the Necronomicon. The Necronomicon looked back at me with 4 bright eyes, and the serene confidence of an object that had performed no useful reasoning, but had nevertheless arrived at a conclusion. No, that will not be happening. The book turned to another page. He has experience with satellites. He would be the best employee. He has experience placing them where I do not want them. That is the problem requiring correction, not a qualification for further employment. The Necronomicon fluttered impatiently and opened to a diagram that spread across both pages. It had drawn itself at the top wearing a crown, a necktie, and what appeared to be several additional eyes for managerial purposes. Beneath it, 2 branches descended through an elaborate organizational structure. The first was labeled Tesla Mineral Acquisitions. 6 dragons had been drawn beneath the heading, each wearing a badge and sitting upon a pile of precious metals. The second was labeled SpaceX Orbital Recovery. The sentient planets appeared below it, although the Necronomicon had reclassified them as moons because moons were closer to satellites, and therefore, according to a note in the margin, possessed greater industry relevance. Arrows connected every branch to a dark square marked Synergy. I looked from the diagram to the book. What have you done? I have formed 2 companies. You have not formed any companies. The dragons work for Tesla. They do not. I know this because dragons have never held an honest job since they became dragons. They collect metals. That describes their pathology, not their employer. They accepted the badges. They saw an opportunity to eat something, which is their nature besides hoarding. The Necronomicon paused before writing. Internal onboarding. I closed several eyes and gathered what remained of my patience. The book watched me with the eager expression of a creature that believed a technicality had survived simply because no one had yet crushed it beneath a larger technicality. And the planets? They work for SpaceX. Why? Because they are in space. I briefly considered assigning the Necronomicon to the mental health section. Existing somewhere does not make it your profession. It is in the company name. The Necronomicon underlined this reasoning twice. I examined the remaining pages. Each planet had been divided into departments. Mountain ranges had been assigned to structural operations. Oceans had become fluid resources. Forests had been placed beneath renewable staffing. every civilization living upon the planets had been counted as part of the workforce, including several species that had not yet discovered employment, and one that had only recently discovered land. You cannot count every living creature on a planet as your employee. They live on company property. They live on the planet, and that's incredibly dystopian. The planet works for me. The planet does not work for you. It does because it accepted a badge. You painted the badge across its northern hemisphere while it was asleep. The Necronomicon turned several pages until it reached the final calculation. According to its figures, the company now employed 4,800,000,006 beings. The final 6 were the dragons, who had apparently insisted upon being counted individually because they regarded collective enumeration as the first stage of taxation. At the bottom of the page, the Necronomicon had written, "I have more employees than Elon Musk." I waited. The book added, "Therefore, Elon Musk works for me." I began massaging my forehead, thankful Madeline was not in earshot. Having more employees than another person does not make that person your employee. The Necronomicon remained open, waiting for the part of my explanation that would make sense. That is not how employment works. It is not how corporate ownership works. It is not even how conquest works. Although I suspect the dragons have been advising you. That part is true. The dragons said ownership belongs to whoever can defend it. The dragons settle property disputes by setting the property on fire. They spoke with great confidence. They are apex predators. Confidence is what happens when appetite acquires legal terminology. The Necronomicon considered this and returned to its organizational chart. Then how do I employ Elon Musk? You begin by determining whether employing him would solve anything. He knows about satellites. He knows how to launch them. He could remove them. He once offered to help solve world hunger if someone produced a sufficiently persuasive spreadsheet. Humanity remains hungry. The book hesitated before turning to another page. I have already sent him an offer. My office became very still. You did what? The Necronomicon displayed a copy of the letter. It had offered Elon Musk an entry-level custodial position beneath the supervision of a sentient moon starting at $7.25 an hour. The proposed compensation included exposure, several dragon coins, access to the staff refrigerator, and 1 hour of annual leave that could be divided into smaller portions with managerial approval. At the bottom of the letter it had signed my name. I read the offer twice. The second reading did not improve either the compensation or the forgery. You signed my name. I practiced. You offered a billionaire unpaid custodial work. The dragon said he would respect the negotiation. The dragons believe every negotiation should begin with a visible horde and conclude when someone loses a village. He has not replied. That is the first encouraging development of this entire project. Something struck the library roof outside my office. A sentient planet drifted past the window, wearing a vast white insignia across its northern hemisphere. The insignia was upside down. One of the dragons followed behind it with a Tesla badge lodged between its teeth and a staff identification card hanging from one horn. I considered the dragons, the planets, the missing architecture, the ruined refrigerator, and the unauthorized corporate empire now operating from the Necronomicon's index. Delegation had produced more work than the original problem. I had assigned a broad objective to a creature whose curiosity functioned like a spear. extraordinarily precise, admirably forceful, and incapable of noticing anything outside the point. Your management experiment is over. The Necronomicon closed slightly. Do I receive severance for my efforts? You will receive clearer instructions this time around. The book opened again. May I keep a little authority still? You may keep exactly enough authority to perform the task I assign you. How much is that? We are about to find out. I removed the custodial badge from its cover and placed it on my desk. The Necronomicon watched with all 4 eyes, but it did not argue. That alone suggested either personal growth or an advanced stage of shock. I dismissed the dragons first. They objected until I explained that their stock options had never existed. One demanded to know whether its shares had vested. Another attempted to repossess the conference table as unpaid compensation. The third had already melted its badge into a commemorative coin and claimed this constituted a retirement account. The planets were easier because none of them had understood that they were employed. One believed SpaceX was a constellation. Another had accepted the position because the Necronomicon promised dental coverage, and it wanted to know whether mountain ranges counted as teeth. The largest had been collecting satellites because it believed orbital recovery meant recovering every object in orbit, regardless of ownership, destination, or whether the object was still transmitting. By the time they departed, the library contained several hundred additional satellites. I stood in the central atrium and examined the results of delegated initiative. Broken machinery filled the upper galleries. Dragon treasure blocked the eastern staircase. Alien containers, ceremonial spoons, abandoned furniture, displaced books, and pieces of planetary geology had accumulated beneath the remaining portion of the roof. The Necronomicon hovered beside me, waiting for another instruction. I could have removed everything myself from the beginning. I had avoided doing so because leadership, according to everyone else who is not me, required trusting others with meaningful responsibility. Yog-Sothoth, in particular, had neglected to mention that meaningful responsibility required meaningful boundaries, which seemed an unusually serious omission for a god of time that is everywhere at once. Open to a blank page, I gently commanded. The Necronomicon obeyed. You are going to examine each object. Before recommending its removal, you will answer 3 questions. You will determine who owns it, whether it belongs in an archive, and whether moving it will damage the library. But the book wrote each question carefully. Who owns it? Is it historically important? Will the library remain where it is? Precisely, yes. Good job. The Necronomicon underlined the 3rd question. Together, we began. The book identified a ceremonial spoon and traced it to a civilization that had attempted to improve soup through prayer. It recommended disposal. That belongs in comparative theology. It is a spoon. It is a spoon with documented provenance. It is still a spoon. The difference between rubbish and an artifact is usually a surviving witness, followed by someone willing to write a label. The Necronomicon reluctantly marked the spoon for archival storage. It examined a broken satellite with a functioning engine. Owner has abandoned it. No archival value. It is one of 300 identical objects. Destination. The book waited for me to decide. I opened a portal. Humid air entered the atrium, followed by distant thunder and the unmistakable sound of a man explaining that an engine would fit if someone removed the passenger seat. The Necronomicon peered through the opening. Florida. Anything containing an engine, a fuel system, communications equipment, or enough metal to become a boat goes there. Why? Florida possesses an unusual concentration of mortals who can examine unidentified aerospace technology and immediately wonder whether it will improve fishing. The satellite passed through the portal. Someone on the other side cheered before it had finished landing. The Necronomicon selected another object. It was a twisted arrangement of metal that intersected itself in 3 unauthorized dimensions and produced a faint radio broadcast from next Thursday. The book studied it for several moments. I do not understand this. That goes to Ohio. I opened a second portal. The landscape beyond it appeared ordinary in the deliberate manner of a place that had spent years denying the allegations. Is Ohio equipped for this? Ohio has accumulated such a dense mythology of unexplained events that reality no longer files incident reports there. The object vanished through the portal. Nothing on the other side reacted, which confirmed that the destination had been selected correctly. We continued through the afternoon. The Necronomicon researched ownership, identified cultural significance, and marked each object for the appropriate destination. I handled the judgment, the portals, and the occasional dragon attempting to reclaim the archival material. The process moved more slowly than the earlier cleaning attempts, but the roof remained attached and no one placed the Necronomicon in a refrigerator. Gradually, the book began asking the questions without prompting. Who owns this? No one appears to. Does it have historical value? It is a disposable container from an extinct civilization. Then it is the last surviving example. Very good. Archives. Archives. The Necronomicon marked the container and moved to the next object with visible satisfaction. Delegation, I discovered, required more than handing another being a problem and returning after the consequences had acquired weather. It required choosing work suited to that being's strengths, defining the limits of its authority, and remaining available when it attempted to employ a billionaire through arithmetic. I found the process needlessly involved. It was also effective. By sunset, the eastern halls were clear. The dragon's treasure had been returned, except for several objects whose original owners had been dead long enough to become academic departments. The satellites had been divided between Florida and Ohio, according to whether their dangers were mechanical or metaphysical. Florida converted one into an airboat before the portal had closed. Ohio issued no statement. The Necronomicon settled beside me as the final object disappeared. Was I good management? You created several problems requiring management to get involved, so just about as good. That counts. It does and it does not. Did I help though? I looked across the restored halls. The floors were visible again. The roof had resumed its traditional position above us. Nothing was orbiting the reference desk. Yes you did. The Necronomicon's pages fluttered with profound satisfaction. I returned the custodial badge to its cover. It immediately wrote beneath it, Assistant Curator of Unattended Objects. Temporary Assistant Curator. Temporary Executive Assistant Curator. We will discuss the title later. The Necronomicon accepted this as a successful negotiation. I returned to my office with the weary satisfaction of a head librarian who had restored order through leadership, patience, and the strategic deployment of 2 American states. My correspondence crystal contained 117 new messages. The first was from Madeline. Interpantheon Archival Acquisition Summit.
On behalf of the Interdimensional Library, I apologize for this morning's unscheduled croissant presentation. The meeting was intended to establish safe procedures for acquiring ancient pantheon texts, funerary records, sacred tablets, prophetic scrolls, and other culturally sensitive materials for the library's archives. Please disregard every pastry-related action item.
I read the message again. Beneath it, Odin had replied to everyone.
Does this mean the pastry hall is cancelled?
Ra had responded several minutes later.
Anubis has already approved the embalming chamber.
Yog-Sothoth had added,
So if everyone could go ahead and review the original agenda before the rescheduled meeting, that would be terrific. Cthulhu, please do not bring another presentation board.
Madeline replied.
He is no longer permitted to reserve presentation boards without a second signature.
I closed the correspondence crystal. The Necronomicon opened on my desk. Should I cancel the croissant orders? I considered the original agenda, the restored library, and several billion pastries already making their way across the dimensions. No, classify them as refreshments and send them to every pantheon that attended the meeting. The Necronomicon flipped to another page. What about Yahweh? I considered this. If Jesus is still interested in distributing bread, we can ask whether he would be willing to break croissants with everyone.